Listen, do you hear that? That gentle whisper across the sand, soft as silk, ancient as time itself. It is the voice of the Sahara, and tonight, it has stories to tell. Stories of an empire that existed long before the world knew the name of Mansa Musa, long before the great kingdoms of Mali and Songhai rose to touch the stars. Tonight, we journey back through the corridors of time, to a place where gold was not currency but destiny, where salt held the power of life and death, and where kings were touched by the divine light of the sun itself. But first, let us pause. Let us breathe in the cool night air of the desert, feel the sand between our fingers, and understand something important. The empire we are about to explore, the Ghana Empire, has no connection to the modern Republic of Ghana that sits along the Atlantic coast of West Africa today. No, this Ghana, this first Ghana, this golden Ghana existed far to the north in the heart of what we now call Mauritania and Mali. It was a different world, a different time, a different dream entirely. The confusion of names is understandable, for in 1957, when the former British colony of Gold Coast sought independence, they chose the name Ghana to honor this ancient empire, to connect themselves to the glorious past of African civilization. But the Ghana we speak of tonight existed 1,000 miles away, in the deep Sahara, where the sand dunes shifted like slow-moving oceans and the stars burned with the clarity of diamonds against the velvet sky. Picture, if you will, a vast sea of sand stretching in every direction, farther than the eye can see, farther than the mind can grasp. This is the Sahara of the 8th century, not the barren wasteland that many imagine today, but a living, breathing landscape of subtle beauty and hidden treasures. The sand is not merely brown or golden, but a tapestry of colors that shift with the light. In the pre-dawn darkness, it appears almost purple, mysterious, and cool to the touch. As the first rays of sun pierce the horizon, it transforms into shades of amber and copper, warming like a lover's embrace. By midday, it blazes white-hot, a mirror reflecting the merciless sun. And now, in the deep of night, it has returned to its primordial darkness, silver-touched by starlight, whispering secrets in languages older than human memory. But the Sahara of Ghana's time was not empty. Oh no, it was very much alive. Green acacia trees dotted the landscape like scattered emeralds, their thorny branches providing shade and sustenance for travelers and animals alike. Underground streams, hidden rivers of life, flowed beneath the sand, known only to those who understood the desert's ancient codes. In places, these waters bubbled up to create oases, small paradises of date palms and cool pools where caravans would rest and replenish their strength for the journeys ahead. The air itself tells stories. Breathe deeply, and you might catch the faint scent of frankincense carried on the wind from distant lands, or the earthier smell of gold dust that seems to permeate everything in this realm. There is the sharp, clean smell of salt, that precious commodity that made empires rise and fall, and underneath it all, the indescribable scent of the desert itself, dry, ancient, eternal. In the distance, if you listen carefully, you might hear the soft tinkling of bells. Not the harsh clanging of metal on metal, but the gentle musical chiming of small bronze bells, each one carefully crafted and tuned to a specific note. These bells hang from the necks of camels, those magnificent ships of the desert, and their sound carries for miles across the empty landscape, a beacon of hope and commerce in the vast sea of sand. The camel bells grow louder now, more distinct, and slowly, emerging from the heat-shimmering horizon like a mirage made real, a caravan appears. At first, it is nothing more than a dark smudge against the star-filled sky, but as it draws closer, details begin to emerge. The lead camel, a magnificent bull with a coat the color of burnished copper, steps with the measured pace of an animal that has crossed 1,000 miles of desert and will cross 1,000 more. His rider, wrapped in indigo robes that seem to absorb the very darkness around them, sits with the easy confidence of one who has made this journey many times before. Behind the lead camel, a procession unfolds like a dream. Dozens of camels, each one loaded with treasures that would make kings weep with envy. Bundles of salt, white as snow and precious as silver, hang from their sides. Pouches of gold dust, carefully sealed and guarded, promise wealth beyond imagination. Ivory tusks, smooth as silk and white as moonlight, are lashed to wooden frames. Bolts of cotton cloth, dyed in colors that have no names, deep purples, brilliant blues, sunset oranges, flutter gently in the night breeze. But it is not just goods that this caravan carries. There are people too, travelers from distant lands who have joined this slow-moving river of commerce for protection and companionship. A merchant from Baghdad, his beard henned red, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, rides beside a Berber trader whose face is veiled against the sand and sun. Behind them, a group of pilgrims on their way to Mecca sway gently with the rhythm of their camels, their voices rising and falling in ancient prayers that seem to blend with the whisper of wind across the dunes. The caravan master, a man of perhaps 50 years with skin darkened by decades under the desert sun, rides near the center of the procession. His camel is not the largest or the most decorated, but there is something in his bearing that speaks of absolute authority. He knows every grain of sand for 1,000 miles, every oasis, every danger, every opportunity. His eyes, dark as the night sky, constantly scan the horizon, reading signs invisible to lesser mortals. A shift in the wind might tell him of a sandstorm approaching. The behavior of his camels might warn of raiders ahead. The color of the dawn sky might reveal the location of water. As the caravan moves through the night, the rhythm of the camel's footsteps creates a hypnotic beat, like a great drum played by invisible hands. Step, 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 step. The sound echoes across the empty landscape, a primal rhythm that speaks of ancient migrations, of humanity's endless journey across the earth. The camel's breathing, deep and steady, mingles with the soft conversations of the travelers, creating a symphony of life in the midst of apparent emptiness. The stars above are not the dim, distant points of light that city dwellers see today, but brilliant jewels that seem close enough to touch. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a river of diamonds, and the constellations tell stories that have guided travelers for millennia. The North Star, faithful and true, points the way to distant lands, while the Southern Cross, barely visible on the horizon, hints at mysteries beyond imagination. In this vast theater of sand and stars, the caravan is both insignificant and momentous. Insignificant because it is dwarfed by the immensity of the desert, a tiny line of life crawling across an endless expanse. Momentous because it represents something profound, the human drive to explore, to trade, to connect with others across impossible distances. These are not merely merchants seeking profit, but pioneers of human civilization, threading together the scattered pearls of humanity into something greater than the sum of its parts. The night air is cool now, a blessed relief from the scorching heat of the day. The travelers pull their robes closer around them, not from cold but from the deep, bone-penetrating chill that comes when the desert releases its stored heat to the star-filled sky. The sand beneath the camels' feet is firm and cool, making soft whooshing sounds as they walk, like the whisper of ancient secrets being shared. And there, in the distance, something new appears on the horizon. At first, it might be mistaken for another dune, another rise in the endless landscape. But as the caravan draws closer, as the bells chime more urgently and the camels quicken their pace as if sensing journey's end, it becomes clear that this is no natural formation. This is the silhouette of a great city, rising from the sand like a dream made manifest. Kumbi Sala. The name itself sounds like music, like the whisper of wind through date palms, like the tinkle of gold coins in a merchant's purse. This is the capital of the Ghana Empire, one of the greatest cities of the medieval world, a place where the wealth of Africa flowed like water and kings ruled with the authority of gods. But we are still in the desert, still with our caravan, still feeling the sand between our fingers and hearing the eternal whisper of the wind. The city is close now, so close that individual buildings begin to emerge from the darkness. There are no electric lights, no neon signs, no modern intrusions to break the ancient spell. Instead, the city reveals itself slowly, organically, like a flower opening in the dawn. The first thing that strikes the traveler is the smell. Not the clean, empty smell of the open desert, but something richer, more complex. There is the scent of cooking fires, of meat roasting over charcoal, of bread baking in clay ovens. There is the smell of incense and exotic spices, of leather and cloth and the sweat of honest labor. And underneath it all, there is the unmistakable scent of gold, not the metal itself, which has no odor, but the essence of wealth, the psychic aroma of prosperity that seems to permeate everything in this place. The sounds change too. The simple rhythm of the caravan's progress gives way to something more complex, more alive. Dogs bark in the distance, their voices carrying across the night air. Somewhere, a baby cries and is quickly hushed. The night watch calls out challenges to the approaching caravan, their voices strong and alert. From within the city comes the sound of drums, soft and rhythmic, accompanying some late-night ceremony or celebration. As the caravan draws closer to the city walls, the true magnitude of Kumbi Sala becomes apparent. This is no simple trading post or desert outpost, but a genuine metropolis, a place where tens of thousands of people live and work and dream. The walls, built of clay and stone, rise high into the night sky, topped with crenellations that give them the appearance of a crown. Guard towers, square and solid, punctuate the walls at regular intervals, their dark shapes standing sentinel against the star-filled sky. The gates of the city are massive, built of thick timber and reinforced with bronze fittings that gleam dully in the starlight. They are closed now, as they always are during the hours of darkness, but the guards have been alerted to the caravan's approach. Torches flicker to life along the walls, casting dancing shadows that make the ancient stones seem to writhe and move like living things. The caravan master raises his hand, and the long line of camels and men comes to a halt. The sudden silence is profound, broken only by the soft snuffling of the camels and the distant sound of the night wind. This is a moment of transition, a threshold between the timeless world of the desert and the bustling complexity of urban life. In a few hours, when the sun rises and the gates open, this caravan will enter the city and become part of the great engine of commerce that drives the Ghana Empire. But for now, in this quiet moment between night and day, between journey and destination, there is only the vast silence of the desert and the patient waiting of men who have traveled far to reach this place. The Ghana Empire. Even the name requires explanation, for it is not what it seems. Ghana was not the name of a country, not the name of a people, not even the name of a city. Ghana was a title, a word that meant warrior king, in the language of the Sonic people who ruled this vast domain. When Arabic travelers wrote of the Ghana Empire, they were not describing a nation called Ghana, but rather the empire of the Ghana, the empire of the warrior king, the empire of the divine ruler who sat upon a throne of gold and commanded the loyalty of 1,000,000 subjects. This distinction is crucial to understanding the nature of this ancient kingdom. The Ghana was not merely a king in the European sense, not simply a man who ruled by birth or conquest. He was something more, something that transcended ordinary human authority. The Ghana was the link between the human and divine worlds, the conduit through which the gods spoke to mortals, the guardian of the sacred forces that made the rains come and the gold flow from the earth. The empire over which the Ghana ruled was vast beyond modern comprehension. It stretched from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the great bend of the Niger River in the east, from the edge of the true desert in the north to the forest regions of the south. This was a territory larger than most European countries, a realm that encompassed dozens of different peoples, languages, and cultures, all united under the golden authority of the Ghana. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. The caravan still waits outside the gates of Kumbi Sala, and the night is deep and quiet around them. The travelers begin to make camp, unloading sleeping mats and water skins, preparing for the few hours of rest before dawn brings them into the city. Fires are lit, small and carefully contained, their flames dancing like tiny spirits in the darkness. The smell of tea begins to mingle with the other scents of the night, strong, sweet tea flavored with mint and sugar, the drink that has sustained desert travelers for centuries. The camels, those patient beasts of burden, settle onto the sand with deep, satisfied groans. Their day's work is done, at least for now, and they can rest their legs and replenish their strength for tomorrow's labors. Some of them begin to chew their cud, their jaws working in slow, meditative rhythm. Others simply close their eyes and seem to sleep, though those who know camels understand that they are always partially alert, always ready to respond to their master's commands. The desert around the city is not empty, even at this late hour. Other caravans have arrived before this one, and their camps dot the landscape like scattered stars. Each fire marks a group of travelers. Each group tells a story of distant lands and exotic goods. There are traders from the north, from the great cities of Morocco and Tunisia, their faces pale beneath their turbans, their robes rich with embroidery and decoration. There are merchants from the east, from the kingdoms along the Niger River, their skin dark as polished ebony, their voices musical with unfamiliar accents. There are even a few intrepid souls from the south, from the forest kingdoms where gold grows in the ground and ivory is as common as wood. All of these people, from all of these distant places, have come to Kumbi-Sala for the same reason: to trade, to exchange their goods for the wealth of the Ghana Empire. They have traveled hundreds or thousands of miles, crossed deserts and rivers, faced bandits and wild animals, all for the opportunity to enter this city and participate in the great marketplace that is the heart of the empire. The night deepens, and one by one, the travelers settle into sleep. But sleep in the desert is not the deep, oblivious rest of those who dwell in cities. It is a lighter thing, always aware of the environment, always ready to respond to the slightest change in the wind or the smallest sound in the darkness. The desert is not a hostile place, but it is an honest one, a place where inattention can mean death and where survival depends on constant awareness of one's surroundings. Above them, the stars continue their eternal dance, the same stars that have guided travelers across this desert for thousands of years. The constellations will slowly across the sky, marking the passage of time in the ancient way, without clocks or calendars, by the simple movement of light through darkness. The Great Bear rises in the north, the Scorpion sets in the west, and the Southern Cross, visible only as a faint glimmer on the horizon, hints at lands beyond the edge of the known world. This is the world of the Ghana Empire, a world of vast distances and patient travel, of caravans and oases, of gold and salt and the endless whisper of wind across sand. It is a world where time moves differently, where a journey might take months and where the arrival of a caravan is an event that can change the fortune of a city. It is a world where the Ghana sits upon his throne of gold, invisible to his subjects, divine in his authority, guardian of the greatest treasure house in all of Africa. Tomorrow, when the sun rises and the gates of Kumbi-Sala open, our caravan will enter the city and become part of this great story. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of the desert, we can only listen to the whisper of the wind and imagine the wonders that await us in the golden city of the Ghana. The hours pass slowly, as they always do in the desert, where time moves not by the ticking of clocks but by the gradual shifting of shadows and the ancient rhythm of breathing. The fires burn lower, the voices grow quieter, and the night settles into that profound silence that exists only in the empty places of the earth. But silence, in the desert, is never truly empty. It is full of stories, full of memories, full of the accumulated wisdom of generations who have passed this way before. An old man sits beside one of the dying fires, his face weathered by decades of sun and sand, his eyes bright with the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime spent traveling these routes. He is a griot, a keeper of stories, a living library of the oral traditions that preserve the history of these lands. Around him, a small group of younger travelers has gathered, drawn by the quiet authority in his voice and the promise of tales that will make the long night pass more quickly. "You ask about the Ghana," the old man says, his voice soft as silk, warm as honey. "You ask about this empire, this kingdom of gold that draws men from the ends of the earth. But to understand the Ghana, you must first understand the beginning. You must hear the stories that our grandfathers told, and their grandfathers before them, stories that stretch back to the time when the world was young and the gods walked among mortals." He pauses, taking a sip of tea from a small glass cup, savoring the sweetness on his tongue. The fire crackles softly, sending small sparks up into the star-filled sky. The listeners lean forward, their faces intent, their minds ready to receive the ancient wisdom that flows like water from the old man's lips. "In the beginning, he continues. There was only the great darkness, and the earth was without form or beauty. But the Creator, whose name is too sacred to speak aloud, looked upon the emptiness and was moved to fill it with wonders. He scattered the stars across the sky like seeds in fertile soil, and he shaped the earth with his hands, creating mountains and valleys, rivers and deserts, forests and plains. But the Creator was not content merely to shape the earth. He wanted to fill it with life, with beings who could appreciate the beauty he had made and give thanks for the abundance he provided. So he breathed upon the dust of the earth, and from that dust arose the first people, the ancestors of all who live today. These first people were not like us. They were taller, stronger, more beautiful than any who have lived since. Their skin gleamed like polished bronze. Their voices were musical as running water, and their eyes held the light of wisdom. They lived in harmony with the earth and with each other, knowing neither war nor want, neither hatred nor fear. But even paradise cannot last forever. The first people grew proud, forgetting the source of their blessings, believing that their strength and beauty came from themselves alone. They began to quarrel among themselves, to covet what others possessed, to forget the simple truths that had made them happy. And so the Creator, seeing that his perfect creation had become corrupted, scattered the people across the earth, dividing them into different tribes and nations, each with its own language and customs. Yet the Creator did not abandon his children entirely. To each people, he gave a special gift, a particular talent that would help them survive and prosper in their new homes. To some, he gave the skill of farming, teaching them to coax grain from the earth and fruit from the trees. To others, he gave the knowledge of metalworking, showing them how to find iron in the ground and shape it into tools and weapons. To still others, he gave the gift of healing, the ability to cure sickness and mend broken bones. But to one people, the people who would come to be known as the Sonic, the Creator gave the greatest gift of all. He gave them the knowledge of gold, the secret of finding and working the most precious of all metals. And with this knowledge came a responsibility, for gold was not merely a metal but a sacred substance, a piece of the sun itself fallen to earth. The Sonic were not numerous, nor were they the strongest of peoples, but they were wise, and they understood that their gift of gold was not meant for them alone. They became traders, sharing their golden treasure with other peoples in exchange for the things they needed: salt to preserve their food, iron to make their tools, cloth to cover their bodies, and horses to carry them swiftly across the vast distances of their homeland. And so, slowly, over many generations, the Sonic built a network of trade that stretched across the entire continent. They became the bridge between the peoples of the north, who dwelt in the cities of the Mediterranean coast, and the peoples of the south, who lived in the forests and savannas of the interior. Gold flowed north like a golden river, while salt and manufactured goods flowed south, and the Sonic became wealthy and powerful through their role as intermediaries. But wealth and power bring their own dangers. Other peoples began to look with envy upon the Sonic and their golden treasure. Raiders came from the desert, warriors from the forests, conquerors from distant lands, all seeking to claim the gold for themselves. The Sonic, being peaceful traders rather than warriors, seemed doomed to lose everything they had built. It was then that the first Ghana appeared. The old man pauses again, his eyes distant, as if he is seeing across the centuries to that legendary time. The fire has burned lower now, casting dancing shadows across his weathered face, making him look like a figure from ancient myth himself. His name is lost to time, this first Ghana, but his deeds are remembered. He was not born to the Sonic, but came to them from the east, from the land of the rising sun. Some say he was a prince of a distant kingdom, driven into exile by jealous brothers. Others claim he was a god in human form, sent by the Creator to protect his chosen people. Still others whisper that he was something else entirely, a being of such power that the very earth trembled at his footsteps. What we know for certain is this: he came to the Sonic in their hour of greatest need, when enemies surrounded them on all sides and their very survival hung in the balance. He was a giant of a man, they say, taller than any mortal, with skin that gleamed like burnished gold and eyes that held the fire of the sun itself. He carried weapons that no smith had ever forged, armor that no arrow could pierce, and when he spoke, his voice was like thunder rolling across the desert. The Sonic elders met with this stranger, and he made them an offer that would change the course of history. He would become their war leader, their protector, their shield against all enemies. In return, they would acknowledge him as their Ghana, their warrior king, their divine ruler, their link to the gods themselves. The title was not merely honorific, but carried with it sacred responsibilities and supernatural powers. The word Ghana itself held deep meaning in the Sonic language. It meant more than simply king or ruler. It meant warrior, but a warrior of a special kind, one who fought not for personal glory or conquest, but for the protection of his people and the preservation of the sacred order. The Ghana was a guardian, a shepherd, a living symbol of the divine authority that governed all things. But the title carried with it a terrible price. The Ghana could never be merely human again. He was set apart from ordinary mortals, transformed into something between man and God. He could no longer walk freely among his people, could no longer speak directly to them, could no longer live as other men lived. He became a sacred figure, approachable only through elaborate rituals and formal ceremonies, visible to his subjects only at prescribed times and under carefully controlled conditions. The first Ghana accepted these conditions, and in doing so, he saved the Sonic from destruction. With supernatural strength and divine guidance, he led them to victory against all their enemies. He established the borders of their territory, created the laws by which they would live, and founded the institutions that would govern them for centuries to come. Most importantly, he created the system of trade that would make the Ghana Empire the wealthiest and most powerful kingdom in all of Africa. Under the Ghana's protection, the Sonic traders could travel safely across vast distances, carrying their gold to distant markets and returning with goods from far-off lands. The Ghana's authority extended far beyond the borders of Sonic territory, for even foreign kings recognized his power and sought his friendship. Caravans traveled under his protection, merchants paid tribute to his treasury, and his name became synonymous with justice and prosperity throughout the known world. But the Ghana was not content merely to rule over traders and merchants. He understood that true power came not from gold alone, but from the control of the sources of wealth. And so he turned his attention to the establishment of permanent settlements, cities that would become centers of trade and administration, fortresses that would protect his people from their enemies. The first of these cities was modest, nothing more than a collection of mud brick houses clustered around a central well. But it was strategically placed at the intersection of several important trade routes, and it quickly grew into a thriving commercial center. Merchants came from great distances to trade in its markets, craftsmen settled there to practice their skills, and farmers cleared the surrounding land to grow food for the growing population. As the city prospered, the Ghana established others, each one carefully positioned to control a crucial aspect of the trade network. There were cities that specialized in the collection and processing of gold, others that served as centers for the salt trade, still others that became famous for their skilled craftsmen and their beautiful manufactured goods. Each city was governed by officials appointed by the Ghana, men who had proven their loyalty and competence through years of faithful service. The trade routes themselves became increasingly sophisticated and organized. What had once been informal paths followed by individual traders became formal highways, marked by wells and rest stations, patrolled by the Ghana soldiers, and regulated by his laws. Merchants who traveled these routes paid taxes to the Ghana's treasury, but in return they received protection from bandits, assistance in case of emergencies, and access to the best markets in the known world. The northern routes led to the great cities of the Mediterranean coast, to Morocco and Tunisia, to Egypt and the holy cities of the Middle East. These routes carried gold and ivory, slaves and exotic woods, all the precious products of the African interior. In return, they brought salt and manufactured goods, horses and weapons, books and ideas from the civilized world. The southern routes penetrated deep into the forest kingdoms, where gold was mined from the earth and ivory was harvested from the mighty elephants that roamed in vast herds. These routes were more dangerous, passing through lands inhabited by peoples who had never acknowledged the Ghana's authority. But the profits were correspondingly greater. A successful expedition to the gold fields of the south could make a merchant wealthy for life. The eastern routes followed the great rivers, the Niger and the Senegal, connecting the Ghana Empire to the kingdoms of the Sudan and the trading cities of the Upper Nile. These routes carried not only goods but also ideas, for the eastern lands were where the new religion of Islam was beginning to spread, brought by Arab traders and missionaries who mingled with the caravans. The western routes led to the Atlantic Ocean, where the Ghana's authority extended to the very edge of the known world. These routes were shorter but no less important, for they connected the empire to the fishing peoples of the coast and the salt producers of the great coastal lagoons. The Ghana's influence reached even to the mysterious islands that lay beyond the horizon, where the spirits of the dead were said to dwell. As the trade network grew and prospered, so too did the Ghana's power and prestige. He was no longer merely the war leader of the Sonic, but the sovereign of a vast empire that stretched from the Atlantic to the Niger, from the edge of the Sahara to the borders of the forest kingdoms. His authority was acknowledged by dozens of different peoples. His laws were obeyed across hundreds of thousands of square miles, and his treasury was filled with the wealth of half a continent. But with great power came great responsibility. The Ghana was not free to rule as he pleased, for he was bound by the ancient laws and customs that governed his people. He was the guardian of the sacred traditions, the protector of the divine order, the living link between the world of mortals and the realm of the gods. Every decision he made, every law he proclaimed, every judgment he rendered had to be in accordance with the will of the ancestors and the requirements of justice. The Ghana's court became a center of learning and culture, attracting scholars and artists from across the known world. The royal library contained thousands of scrolls and books, written in Arabic and Hebrew, in Greek and Latin, in the various languages of Africa itself. The Ghana's advisors were men of great wisdom and experience, drawn from all the peoples of his empire, united in their loyalty to their divine ruler. The Ghana's army was the finest in Africa, equipped with the best weapons and armor that gold could buy, trained by the most skilled warriors from across the continent. But the Ghana rarely used his military might for conquest, preferring to extend his influence through trade and diplomacy. He understood that a willing vassal was more valuable than a conquered enemy, and that prosperity was a more reliable foundation for power than fear. The Ghana's justice was legendary throughout the known world. Men would travel for months to bring their disputes before his court, confident that they would receive a fair hearing and an equitable judgment. The Ghana's laws were simple and clear, based on the ancient customs of his people but adapted to the needs of a complex, multi-ethnic empire. Crime was rare in his domains, for his subjects knew that wrongdoing would be swiftly punished and that virtue would be rewarded. As the centuries passed, the Ghana Empire grew ever stronger and more prosperous. The cities became larger and more beautiful, the trade routes more extensive and more secure, the treasury more filled with gold and precious goods. The Ghana's name was spoken with reverence in the courts of distant kings, and his friendship was sought by rulers from across the known world. But the Ghana himself remained a figure of mystery, hidden behind the elaborate ceremonies and protocols of his court. His subjects knew him only as a distant, semi-divine presence, a golden figure glimpsed briefly during the great festivals and ceremonies that marked the passage of the seasons. He was, in the truest sense, the invisible king, the ruler whose power was felt everywhere but whose person was seen by none save his most trusted advisors. And so the Ghana Empire flourished, built on the foundation of trade and held together by the divine authority of the Ghana himself. It was a golden age, a time when the deserts bloomed with prosperity and the cities rang with the sound of commerce and celebration. It was a time when the Ghana's name was synonymous with justice and abundance, when his empire was the envy of the world and his capital was the greatest city in all of Africa. But every age, no matter how golden, must eventually come to an end. And as the stars will overhead and the night grows older, we can sense the shadows gathering on the horizon, the first hints of the changes that will transform this ancient land and bring the Ghana Empire to its destined conclusion. Yet that is a story for another time, another night, another whisper of wind across the eternal desert. The old griot falls silent, his tale complete for now, his voice blending back into the gentle murmur of the night. The fire has burned to embers, glowing softly in the darkness, and the listeners sit in contemplative silence, their minds filled with visions of the legendary Ghana and the golden age of his empire. In the distance, the first pale light of dawn begins to touch the eastern horizon, and the city of Kumbisala prepares to open its gates to another day of trade and prosperity. But the stories of the past still echo in the desert air, reminding all who hear them that the present is built upon the foundations of the past, and that the Ghana Empire, though ancient, is not forgotten. The bells of the caravans begin to stir, their soft chiming mixing with the call of the muezzin from the city's mosques, creating a gentle symphony that speaks of the blending of cultures and traditions that has always characterized this crossroads of the world. The Ghana Empire lives on, not only in the stones of its cities and the gold of its treasury, but in the memories of its people and the stories they tell beneath the star-filled sky of the eternal desert. Dawn comes slowly to the Sahara, not with the sudden burst of light that marks morning in other lands, but with a gradual transformation that seems to emerge from the very essence of the desert itself. The eastern horizon begins to blush with the faintest touch of rose, a color so delicate it might be mistaken for imagination. The stars, those faithful companions of the night, begin to fade one by one, not disappearing but rather melting into the lightening sky like sugar dissolving in warm tea. The air changes first, becoming lighter, fresher, carrying new scents and sounds from the awakening city. The cool night breeze gives way to the first stirrings of the day wind, and with it comes the unmistakable aroma of breakfast fires being lit throughout Kumbisala. Smoke rises in thin, straight columns in the still air, carrying the scent of burning wood and charcoal, of grain being ground into flour, of meat being prepared for the morning meal. The caravan master is already awake, as such men always are, his internal clock attuned to the rhythms of desert travel. He moves quietly among his charges, checking the loads, examining the camels for signs of injury or illness, speaking softly to his men in the mixture of Arabic, Berber, and local languages that serves as the lingua franca of the trade routes. His movements are economical, practiced, those of a man who has performed these same tasks 1,000 times before. The camels begin to stir, their great heads lifting from the sand, their eyes blinking slowly as they adjust to the growing light. They rise in their peculiar way, back legs first, then front legs, their bodies swaying like ships in a gentle sea as they find their balance. The bells around their necks chime softly with each movement, creating a musical backdrop to the morning's activities. As the sky lightens, the true magnificence of Kumbisala begins to reveal itself. What had seemed in the darkness to be merely a large city now shows itself to be something far more impressive. A genuine metropolis, a place that rivals the greatest cities of the medieval world. The walls, built of local stone and clay brick, rise to a height of perhaps 20 feet. Their surfaces weathered by centuries of sun and sand but still solid and imposing. The gates are massive structures, reinforced with iron and bronze, carved with intricate geometric patterns that speak of skilled craftsmen and abundant resources. But it is not the walls or gates that capture the attention of the arriving travelers. It is the city itself, spreading out beyond the fortifications like a vast tapestry woven from stone and wood, clay and thatch. Buildings rise in terraced levels, their flat roofs creating a stepped pattern that follows the gentle undulations of the landscape. Some structures are modest, single-story dwellings with small courtyards and simple doorways. Others are grander, multi-story palaces and public buildings that speak of wealth and power. The architecture is distinctly African, yet influenced by the many cultures that have passed through this crossroads of the world. The basic construction is of sun-dried brick and stone, materials that are well suited to the desert climate. But the decorative elements show influences from North Africa, from the Middle East, from the forest kingdoms of the south. Geometric patterns carved into stone lintels, painted designs on wooden doors, metalwork that combines local techniques with imported styles. All these elements come together to create a unique architectural language that belongs to Kumbisala alone. The call of the muezzin rings out across the city, a haunting, melodious sound that seems to hang in the still morning air. It is answered by other voices from other mosques, creating a complex harmony that speaks of the growing Islamic influence in this traditionally pagan land. Yet alongside these Muslim calls to prayer, other sounds can be heard, the beating of drums from traditional temples, the chanting of priests following older rituals, the simple morning songs of people greeting the new day according to customs that predate the arrival of Islam by centuries. The gates of the city swing open with a deep, resonant creaking that seems to echo from the very foundations of the earth. The sound carries across the desert, reaching the ears of waiting travelers like a promise of hospitality and commerce. Guard towers on either side of the entrance are manned by soldiers in leather armor, their spears glinting in the early light, their faces alert but not unfriendly. These men have seen countless caravans pass through these gates, have welcomed traders from every corner of the known world, and they perform their duties with the easy confidence of those who serve a powerful and prosperous master. The first to enter are the local traders, men who have been camping outside the walls for days or weeks, waiting for the optimal moment to bring their goods to market. They drive small groups of donkeys or lead single camels, their loads modest but carefully chosen. These are men who understand the rhythms of the city, who know which days are best for selling certain goods, who have established relationships with specific buyers and can afford to wait for the right moment to make their sales. Behind them come the members of our caravan, a more impressive procession that draws admiring glances from the guards and early risers who have gathered to watch the morning's arrivals. The lead camel, magnificent in his copper-colored coat, steps through the gates with the dignity of a king entering his throne room. His rider sits tall and straight, his indigo robes flowing in the morning breeze, his eyes already scanning the city streets for signs of opportunity and danger. The interior of Kumbi Sala unfolds like a flower opening to the sun. The main thoroughfare is wide and well-paved, lined with buildings that seem to grow more impressive the deeper one ventures into the city. But what strikes the newcomer most immediately is not the architecture but the people, the incredible diversity of human faces and forms that populate this crossroads of the world. There are sonic merchants, the original inhabitants of this land, their skin ranging from deep brown to golden bronze, their features reflecting the ancient nobility of their race. They wear robes of fine cotton, often white or cream-colored, with geometric patterns embroidered in gold thread. Their turbans are wound with careful precision, and many carry staffs of carved wood or ivory that serve as both walking aids and symbols of their status. Arab traders move among them, their features sharper, their skin often lighter, their beards carefully trimmed and oiled. They wear the long robes and head coverings of the desert, but their garments are made of finer materials: silk from distant lands, cotton of the highest quality, wool that has been dyed in colors that seem to capture the very essence of jewels. Their movements are quick and purposeful, their voices animated as they conduct their business in the musical cadences of classical Arabic. Berber merchants from the north bring their own distinctive presence to the city's streets. Their faces are often veiled against the sun and sand, but their eyes are sharp and intelligent, missing nothing of what goes on around them. They favor darker colors in their clothing, deep blues and rich browns that blend with the shadows of the desert. Their camels are often larger and stronger than those of other traders, bred for the long journeys across the harshest stretches of the Sahara. From the forest kingdoms of the south come traders whose skin is dark as polished ebony, whose features speak of peoples who have never known the touch of desert sand. They bring with them the rich smells of the forest, exotic woods, rare spices, the musk of strange animals. Their clothing is often more colorful than that of the desert dwellers, with patterns that seem to capture the vibrant life of the jungle itself. But it is not only merchants who populate these streets. There are craftsmen and artisans, their hands marked by their trades, the leatherworker with his stained fingers, the goldsmith with his magnifying glass hanging from a chain around his neck, the weaver with cotton fibers clinging to his clothes. There are scholars and teachers, their arms full of books and scrolls, their faces bearing the serene expression of those who have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge. Women move through the crowds with grace and dignity, their roles varying according to their cultural backgrounds. Some are heavily veiled in the Islamic fashion, their presence indicated only by the rustle of fabric and the gentle chiming of jewelry. Others follow more traditional customs, their faces uncovered, their clothing bright with colors and patterns that speak of ancient traditions. They carry themselves with the confidence of those who play important roles in the city's economic and social life. Children dart between the legs of adults, their laughter bright as bells, their eyes wide with wonder at the exotic sights and sounds that surround them. They represent the future of this great city, growing up in a world where different cultures blend and merge, where the boundaries between peoples become fluid and permeable. The caravan moves deeper into the city, following the main thoroughfare that serves as the great commercial artery of Kumbisala. The street is alive with activity even at this early hour, as merchants prepare their stalls, craftsmen arrange their workshops, and the general population begins the daily routines that keep the city functioning. The sound of voices speaking in a dozen different languages creates a musical backdrop to the morning's activities, a constant murmur that rises and falls like the breathing of some great living creature. The architecture becomes more elaborate as one moves toward the center of the city. The simple mud-brick houses of the outskirts give way to more substantial structures, 2- and 3-story buildings with carved wooden balconies, painted shutters, and courtyards that glimpse of gardens and fountains. The streets themselves are wider and better maintained, paved with flat stones that provide stable footing for both humans and animals. But it is the division of the city that most clearly reveals its unique character. For Kumbisala is not one city but two, separated not by walls or formal boundaries, but by invisible lines of culture and religion that are nonetheless real and significant. The division is not absolute, people move freely between the two sections, and commerce flows unimpeded from one to the other. But the differences are unmistakable to anyone who knows how to look. The northern section of the city, closer to the gates through which the caravan has just entered, is dominated by the growing Muslim population. Here, the architecture shows strong Islamic influences, pointed arches, geometric decorations, the characteristic patterns of Islamic art and design. The streets are laid out in a more formal pattern, with mosques serving as focal points around which neighborhoods are organized. The call to prayer rings out 5 times a day from multiple minarets, creating a sonic landscape that speaks of devotion and discipline. The Muslim quarter is home to many of the city's long-distance traders, men who have connections with the great Islamic cities of North Africa and the Middle East. Their houses often feature the enclosed courtyards and flat roofs that are characteristic of Islamic architecture, designed to provide privacy and protection from the desert sun. The streets are often narrower than in other parts of the city, creating welcome shade during the heat of the day. Islamic schools, known as madrasas, occupy prominent positions in this section of the city. These institutions teach not only the Quran and Islamic law but also mathematics, astronomy, and other subjects that are essential for successful merchants. The sound of children reciting their lessons in Arabic can be heard from the courtyards of these schools, a rhythmic chanting that adds to the distinctive character of the neighborhood. The markets in the Muslim quarter specialize in goods that are particularly valued in the Islamic world: fine textiles, precious metals, spices, and books. The merchants here often have connections with trade networks that stretch from Spain to India, and their shops contain treasures from across the known world. The negotiation of prices is conducted with the elaborate courtesy that characterizes Islamic business practices, with multiple rounds of tea and lengthy discussions of quality and value. The southern section of the city, by contrast, remains more faithful to the traditional customs of the Sonic people. Here, the architecture is more organic, following older patterns that have been shaped by centuries of adaptation to the local environment. The buildings are often round or oval in shape, with thatched roofs and walls of local stone and clay. The streets follow the natural contours of the landscape, creating a more irregular but somehow more natural pattern than the geometric precision of the Muslim quarter. This traditional section of the city is dominated by the Great Royal Complex, a sprawling collection of buildings that serves as the residence of the Ghana and the administrative center of the empire. The complex is surrounded by high walls, but these are not the military fortifications of a defensive structure. Rather, they are screens that provide privacy and create the sacred space necessary for the proper conduct of royal ceremonies and rituals. The royal complex is a city within a city, containing not only the living quarters of the Ghana and his court but also temples, administrative buildings, workshops, and the great treasury where the empire's gold is stored. The architecture here is distinctly African, with buildings that seem to grow organically from the earth itself. The walls are covered with decorative patterns that tell the history of the empire, and the courtyards are filled with trees and fountains that create oases of coolness in the desert heat. The Ghana himself dwells at the very center of this complex, in a palace that no ordinary person has ever seen. It is said that the building is covered entirely in gold, that the walls are made of precious stones, that the very air inside shimmers with divine light. Whether these stories are true or not, the palace serves its purpose, to create an aura of mystery and sanctity around the person of the Ghana, to emphasize his divine nature and his separation from ordinary mortals. The traditional quarter is also home to the great indigenous temples, structures that predate the arrival of Islam by centuries. These buildings are characterized by their integration with the natural environment, their use of local materials, and their incorporation of traditional symbols and designs. The priests who serve in these temples maintain the old rituals and ceremonies, ensuring that the spiritual traditions of the Sonic people are preserved and transmitted to future generations. The markets in the traditional quarter have a different character from those in the Muslim section. Here, the emphasis is on local products and traditional crafts. Gold dust is measured and weighed with ancient precision. Salt is cut into blocks according to customs that have been followed for generations, and craftsmen work with techniques that have been passed down through their families for centuries. The bargaining is more direct, more personal, reflecting the face-to-face relationships that characterize traditional African commerce. Between these two sections of the city, there is a zone of transition where the boundaries blur and the cultures merge. Here, one can find merchants who follow Islamic practices but maintain traditional African customs, craftsmen who work with imported materials but use local techniques, and families who have adapted to the new religion while preserving their ancestral traditions. This transitional zone is perhaps the most characteristic feature of Kumbi Sala, representing the city's unique ability to accommodate different cultures and traditions within a single urban framework. The Great Market Square of Kumbi Sala lies at the heart of this transitional zone, a vast open space paved with flat stones and surrounded by covered arcades where the most valuable goods are traded. This is the beating heart of the city, the place where the wealth of half a continent changes hands, where fortunes are made and lost, where the economic pulse of the Ghana Empire can be felt most strongly. The market comes alive with the sunrise, as merchants from all sections of the city converge to begin another day of trading. The sound is overwhelming at first, hundreds of voices speaking in dozens of languages, the braying of donkeys, the bells of camels, the hammer of craftsmen, the sizzle of food cooking over charcoal fires. But gradually, the chaos resolves itself into patterns, into the complex rhythms of commerce that have been refined over centuries of practice. The most valuable goods are traded in the covered arcades that surround the square. Here, gold dust is measured on scales so precise that they can detect the weight of a grain of sand. Salt is examined by experts who can determine its origin and purity by taste alone. Ivory is inspected for flaws and graded according to size and quality. Slaves are examined and sold, their fate determined by their skills and physical condition. The negotiations are conducted in whispers, with small groups of men gathering around samples of merchandise, their faces intent with concentration. In the open square, the trade is more boisterous and democratic. Here, ordinary people come to buy the goods they need for daily life: grain and oil, cloth and leather, tools and weapons. The merchants who serve this market are more numerous and less wealthy than those in the arcades, but they provide the essential services that keep the city functioning. Their stalls are colorful and varied, creating a patchwork of textures and hues that delights the eye and stimulates the senses. The smells of the market are as varied as it sounds. There is the earthy smell of grain and legumes, the sharp scent of spices and herbs, the rich aroma of leather and cloth. The smell of cooking food mingles with the more exotic scents of imported perfumes and incense. Underlying everything is the distinctive smell of the desert itself: dry, clean, tinged with the metallic scent of sand and stone. The sights are equally varied and stimulating. Bolts of cloth in every color imaginable hang from wooden frames, their surfaces catching and reflecting the morning light. Piles of grain create golden pyramids that seem to glow with inner fire. Leather goods, saddles, bags, shoes, shields, are displayed with careful attention to their beauty and functionality. Weapons, swords, spears, bows, arrows gleam with the deadly beauty of well-crafted steel. But it is the gold that draws the most attention, the gold that is the foundation of the city's wealth and power. It appears in many forms, as dust carefully measured in small leather pouches, as nuggets that gleam like captured sunlight, as finished jewelry that speaks of the skill of local craftsmen. The gold trade is conducted with special ceremony and precision, for everyone understands that this is not merely a commercial transaction but a sacred act, a participation in the divine mystery that has made the Ghana Empire the wonder of the world. The people who populate this market are as diverse as the goods they trade. There are local farmers who have brought their surplus crops to sell, their faces weathered by sun and wind, their hands calloused from honest labor. There are skilled craftsmen who have spent months creating beautiful objects, their eyes bright with the pride of accomplishment. There are merchants who have traveled thousands of miles to reach this market, their faces marked by the hardships of the journey, but their spirits buoyed by the prospect of profit. Women play important roles in the market, their responsibilities varying according to their cultural backgrounds. Some are merchants in their own right, trading in textiles and household goods, their business acumen equal to that of any man. Others accompany their husbands or fathers, providing support and assistance in the complex negotiations that characterize long-distance trade. Still others are skilled in particular crafts, pottery, weaving, food preparation, that require their specialized knowledge and abilities. The market is also a center of information exchange, a place where news from distant lands is shared and discussed. Merchants arriving from the north bring reports of political developments in Morocco and Tunisia, of changes in demand for various goods, of new opportunities for trade. Those coming from the south share information about conditions in the gold fields, about the activities of competing kingdoms, about the discovery of new sources of wealth. The Ghana's presence is felt everywhere in the market, though he himself is never seen. His officials move among the merchants, collecting taxes and fees, ensuring that the proper standards are maintained, settling disputes that arise between traders. The Ghana's currency, standardized weights and measures, official seals and stamps, provides the framework within which all commerce is conducted. His laws, fair, consistent, and strictly enforced, create the atmosphere of trust and security that is essential for successful trade. As the morning progresses and the sun climbs higher in the sky, the market reaches its peak of activity. The sound of voices rises to a crescendo, the movement of people creates patterns of constant motion, and the energy of commerce fills the air like electricity. This is Kumbi Sala at its most characteristic, a place where the wealth of Africa flows like a great river, where different cultures meet and merge, where the power of the Ghana Empire is made manifest in the daily activities of trade and exchange. The caravan that entered the city gates at dawn has now dispersed throughout the market, its members seeking the best prices for their goods, establishing relationships with local merchants, gathering information about market conditions and future opportunities. They have become part of the great commercial organism that is Kumbi Sala, contributors to the prosperity that has made this city the greatest in all of Africa. But the market is only one aspect of this remarkable city. As the day progresses, other dimensions of life in Kumbi Sala will reveal themselves. The religious ceremonies that bind the community together, the administrative systems that keep the empire functioning, the cultural activities that make life rich and meaningful. The city is a living organism, constantly changing and adapting, yet maintaining its essential character as the golden heart of the Ghana Empire. The sounds of the market begin to blend with other urban sounds, the calling of the muezzin from the minarets, the chanting of priests in the traditional temples, the laughter of children playing in the courtyards, the gentle splash of fountains in the gardens of the wealthy. These sounds create a symphony of urban life that is unique to Kumbi Sala, a musical backdrop to the daily drama of existence in this crossroads of the world. As we stand in the market square, surrounded by the sights and sounds and smells of this extraordinary city, we can feel the pulse of an empire at its peak. The Ghana Empire has reached its golden age, a time when trade flourishes, when different cultures coexist in harmony, when the authority of the Ghana extends across vast territories and his name is spoken with reverence throughout the known world. This is Kumbi Sala in its glory, the greatest city of medieval Africa, the golden heart of the first great empire of the Western Sudan. The sun has climbed higher now, casting sharp shadows across the market square, and the true business of the day begins in earnest. The preliminary greetings and pleasantries are over, the quality of goods has been assessed, and now the serious work of commerce can commence. This is the moment when the Ghana Empire reveals its true nature, not as a military power built on conquest, but as a commercial empire founded on the patient exchange of goods across vast distances. In the most exclusive corner of the market, beneath a canopy of fine silk that filters the harsh sunlight into golden rays, the gold trade unfolds with the solemnity of a religious ceremony. The merchant who presides over this most sacred of transactions is an elderly Sonic man named Diarisso, whose family has dealt in gold for 7 generations. His fingers, long and delicate as those of a scholar, move with practiced precision as he examines each sample of gold dust that is brought to his stall. "Ah, my friend," he says to a travel-worn trader who has just arrived from the southern gold fields, his voice soft and musical. "You bring me gifts from the earth itself, but tell me, from which river does this gold come? For each source has its own character, its own virtue, and the price must reflect not only the weight but the quality of the metal." The trader, a man of the forest peoples whose skin bears the ritual scars of his clan, carefully unwraps a small leather pouch and pours a measure of gold dust onto Diarisso's bronze scales. The particles catch the light like tiny stars, each one a fragment of the sun itself fallen to earth. "This comes from the bambuk fields," he replies, his accent thick with the musical tones of the southern languages. "From the river that sings in the morning, where the fish are golden and the water runs sweet." Diarisso nods knowingly. He has heard this poetic description before, for the forest people speak of their gold sources in metaphors that have been passed down through generations. The river that sings in the morning is known to Arab geographers as the Senegal River, and its gold is indeed among the finest in all of Africa. He lifts a small amount of the dust with a bronze spoon, examining it closely through a magnifying glass made of polished crystal. "Yes," he murmurs, "I can see the characteristic flakes, the way the light dances on the surface. This is indeed bambuk gold, and of the highest quality. But tell me, friend, what quantity do you offer, and what do you seek in return?" The negotiation that follows is an art form in itself, a delicate dance of offer and counteroffer that has been refined over centuries of practice. It is not merely a matter of determining price, but of establishing a relationship of trust and mutual respect that will endure long after this particular transaction is complete. The forest trader does not simply want to sell his gold. He wants to establish a connection with the great commercial networks that flow through Kumbisala, to become part of the vast web of trade that connects his remote village to the courts of distant kings. "I offer 10 measures of dust," the trader says, using the traditional unit of measurement that has been standardized throughout the Ghana Empire. "And I seek salt, of course, for my people have great need of it, but also iron, for our smiths are skilled but our ore is poor. And if it please you, some of those blue beads that come from the northern lands, for they are much prized by our women." Diarisso considers this request carefully. The exchange rate between gold and salt is well established, based on the relative scarcity of each commodity in different regions. But iron and glass beads are luxury items, and their value depends on current market conditions and the availability of supply. He must balance his own profit against the need to maintain good relationships with his suppliers, for the gold trade depends on trust and reputation as much as on wealth. "For 10 measures of bambuk gold," he finally responds, "I can offer you 15 blocks of Tagaza salt, each one pure and white as the desert moon. The iron is more difficult. Good iron is scarce this season, for the smiths of the north have been busy with the harvest of weapons. But I can give you 5 spearheads and 3 hoe blades, all of the finest steel. As for the blue beads, you ask for costly things, my friend. These come from the glassmakers of Alexandria, carried across the great desert at enormous expense. But for you, because you bring such fine gold, I will add 1 string of beads, enough to make a beautiful necklace for a chief's wife." The trader's eyes brighten at this offer. He had hoped for more iron, but the quality of the salt is excellent, and the blue beads are indeed precious beyond measure. After further discussion and the ritual sharing of mint tea, the bargain is struck. The gold is carefully weighed and measured, the salt blocks are examined for purity and quality, and the iron goods are tested for hardness and temper. Each aspect of the transaction is witnessed by other merchants, for reputation is everything in this business, and any hint of dishonesty or unfair dealing would spread quickly through the trade networks. But gold is not the only precious commodity that flows through the markets of Kumbisala. In another section of the square, the salt trade unfolds with equal ceremony and precision. The merchant who dominates this trade is a Berber named Abu Bakr, whose caravans travel regularly to the great salt mines of Tagaza, far to the north in the heart of the Sahara. His stall is dominated by massive blocks of salt, each one cut to standard size and shape, their surfaces gleaming white as snow in the bright sunlight. "Come, my brothers," Abu Bakr calls out to passing traders, his voice carrying the musical accent of the northern deserts. "See what treasures I bring from the mines of Tagaza, where the salt is pure as mountain snow and precious as silver. Each block is worth its weight in gold in the southern lands, where the people hunger for this gift of the earth." A group of merchants from the forest kingdoms approach his stall, their eyes wide with wonder at the sight of so much salt in one place. In their homeland, salt is obtained by a laborious process of evaporating seawater or extracting it from saline plants, and the quantities available are always limited. Here, displayed in abundance, is enough salt to preserve meat for an entire village for a year. "What price do you ask for this marvel?" one of them inquires, his voice respectful but eager. "In our lands, such salt as this would make a man wealthy beyond his dreams." Abu Bakr smiles, for he has heard such comments many times before. "The price is fair, my friend, for I do not seek to impoverish my customers, but to build lasting relationships. 1 block of Tagaza salt for 1 measure of gold dust, or its equivalent in other goods. But I tell you truly, the value of this salt extends far beyond its weight in gold. With this salt, you can preserve meat for long journeys, you can cure hides for leather, you can season your food and make it fit for kings." The forest merchant examines the salt carefully, testing its purity with his tongue, feeling its texture between his fingers. Salt of this quality is indeed rare in the southern lands, where the humid climate makes preservation difficult and the lack of natural salt deposits forces people to rely on inferior substitutes. A single block of Tagaza salt could transform the diet of an entire household, allowing them to preserve meat from successful hunts and trade with neighboring villages. "I have no gold dust," the merchant admits, "but I carry other things of value. What would you say to ivory, pure white and taken from the greatest elephants of the deep forest? Or leopard skins, spotted like the stars of heaven? Or kola nuts, which bring energy and strength to those who chew them?" Abu Bakr considers these alternatives carefully. Ivory is always in demand in the northern markets, where it is carved into beautiful objects for the wealthy. Leopard skins are prized for their beauty and rarity, often used in royal ceremonies and religious rituals. Kola nuts, while less valuable per unit of weight, are essential for long desert journeys, providing energy and alertness to weary travelers. "Show me what you have," he says, "and let us see if we can reach an agreement that benefits us both." The negotiation that follows involves not only the determination of relative values, but also the assessment of quality and condition. The ivory must be examined for cracks and flaws, the leopard skins must be properly cured and free from damage, the kola nuts must be fresh and potent. Each item is weighed and measured, compared to established standards, and evaluated according to current market conditions. The complexity of these transactions reflects the sophisticated nature of the Ghana Empire's economy. This is not a simple barter system where goods are exchanged directly for other goods, but a complex network of credit, reputation, and long-term relationships that enables trade to flow smoothly across vast distances and cultural boundaries. Merchants like Abu Bakr and Diarisso serve as more than simple buyers and sellers. They are bankers, information brokers, and cultural ambassadors who connect distant regions and diverse peoples. The iron trade, conducted in a different section of the market, reveals another aspect of the empire's economic complexity. The merchant who dominates this trade is a sonic smith named Konate, whose family has been working metal for generations. His stall is filled with the tools and weapons that are essential for daily life in medieval Africa: hoes and axes for farming, spears and swords for hunting and warfare, knives and needles for crafts and household tasks. Iron is the bone of civilization, Conade explains to a group of customers, his voice carrying the authority of generations of accumulated knowledge. Without iron, we cannot clear the forests, cannot till the soil, cannot defend ourselves from our enemies. The iron I offer comes from the best mines in the empire, worked by smiths who have inherited the secrets of their craft from their ancestors. The iron trade is complicated by the fact that iron ore is not found everywhere, and the knowledge of smelting and working iron is closely guarded by specialized craftsmen. Some regions of the empire are rich in iron ore but lack the skilled smiths needed to work it effectively. Others have master smiths but must import their raw materials from distant sources. The result is a complex network of specialization and exchange that spreads across the entire empire. A young trader from the eastern provinces approaches Konate's stall, his eyes bright with interest. "I come from the land of the great bend of the river," he says, referring to the region where the Niger River curves northward toward the desert. "Our smiths are skilled, but our ore is poor. What would you ask for good iron bars, suitable for working into tools?" Conade examines the young man carefully, noting the quality of his clothing, the ornaments he wears, the way he carries himself. These details tell a story of social status and economic capability that is essential for determining the terms of trade. "Iron bars are costly," he replies, "for they represent not only the value of the ore but also the skill of the smith who has refined it. But tell me, what can you offer in return? What goods does your distant land produce that might be of value here in Kumbisala?" The young trader's face brightens. "We have cotton," he says, "the finest cotton in all the empire, white as clouds and soft as silk. Our women spin it into thread so fine it seems like spider's web, and our weavers create cloth that is prized even in the courts of the north. I carry samples with me, if you would care to examine them." The mention of cotton brings murmurs of interest from other merchants who have been listening to the conversation. Fine cotton cloth is always in demand, both for local use and for export to the northern markets. The climate of the Ghana Empire makes cotton cultivation possible in certain regions, but the quality varies considerably depending on local conditions and the skill of the farmers. Conade examines the cotton samples with the practiced eye of a man who has been involved in trade for many years. The fibers are indeed fine and white, with the long staple length that indicates high quality. The thread is evenly spun and strong, while the finished cloth is smooth and well woven. This is cotton that would command high prices in any market. "Your cotton is indeed fine," he admits, "and I can see that your people are skilled in its cultivation and processing. But cotton, while valuable, is not as precious as iron. I would need a considerable quantity to make the exchange worthwhile." The negotiation that follows reveals the complex calculations that underlie all trade in the Ghana Empire. The relative values of different commodities are determined not only by their intrinsic worth but also by their scarcity, their transportability, and their demand in different markets. Cotton is valuable but bulky, making it expensive to transport over long distances. Iron is more compact but heavier, requiring strong pack animals and careful planning for long journeys. Meanwhile, in the most discreet corner of the market, a trade unfolds that is both more profitable and more morally complex than any other. The slave trade, conducted in whispered conversations and hidden chambers, represents the dark side of the Ghana Empire's prosperity. The merchant who dominates this trade is a man named Al-Mansur, whose origins are unclear but whose wealth is undeniable. His stall is inconspicuous, marked only by a small sign in Arabic script, but those who know where to look can find him. The slaves who are traded here come from many sources. Some are prisoners of war, captured in the raids and conflicts that periodically erupt along the empire's borders. Others are criminals who have been sentenced to slavery as punishment for their crimes. Still others are people who have sold themselves or their family members into slavery to escape poverty or debt. Each case is different, but all represent human beings reduced to the status of commodities. "I seek strong men for the copper mines," a merchant from the north whispers to Al-Mansur, his voice barely audible above the noise of the market. The work is hard, but the pay is good for those who can endure it. What can you offer? Al-Mansur considers this request carefully. The copper mines of the north are notorious for their harsh conditions, and slaves sent there rarely survive for more than a few years. But the demand for copper is strong, and the mine owners are willing to pay good prices for suitable workers. I have several possibilities, he replies, but the cost will be high. Strong men are always in demand, and the supply is limited. The negotiation that follows is conducted in the same businesslike manner as any other trade, but the subject matter makes it deeply disturbing. Human beings are evaluated like livestock, their strength and health assessed, their skills and experience catalogued. The prices discussed represent not just economic value but human suffering, the breaking of families and communities, the reduction of free people to the status of property. Not all slavery in the Ghana Empire is the brutal exploitation that characterizes the mining operations. Many slaves serve as domestic workers, craftsmen, or soldiers, and their conditions can be relatively comfortable. Some even achieve positions of responsibility and influence within their masters' households. But the fundamental injustice remains the denial of human freedom and dignity for the sake of economic profit. The slave trade also reveals the international connections of the Ghana Empire. Slaves are exported to the northern markets, where they are sold to wealthy households in Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. Some are even shipped across the Mediterranean to Europe, where they serve in the courts of Christian kings. In return, the empire receives luxury goods, manufactured products, and precious metals that enhance its wealth and power. But the true foundation of the Ghana Empire's prosperity lies not in any single commodity, but in the empire's position as an intermediary between different economic zones. The empire sits at the crossroads of the Sahara, controlling the routes that connect the gold-producing regions of the south with the salt mines of the north, the iron-working centers of the east with the cotton-growing areas of the west. This strategic position allows the Ghana to extract tribute and taxes from all trade that passes through his territory, while also providing opportunities for his own merchants to profit from the exchange of goods. The caravan routes that connect the empire to the outside world are marvels of organization and planning. The northern routes, which carry goods to the Mediterranean coast, are perhaps the most challenging and most profitable. These routes cross hundreds of miles of desert, through landscapes where water is scarce and the sun is merciless. The caravans that attempt these journeys must be carefully planned and well supplied, with experienced guides who know the location of every well and oasis. A typical caravan bound for the north might consist of several hundred camels, each one carrying up to 300 pounds of goods. The caravan master is a man of enormous responsibility, for the success or failure of the expedition depends on his knowledge and leadership. He must plan the route, arrange for supplies, hire guards, and negotiate with the various authorities who control different segments of the journey. The goods carried by these caravans represent the concentrated wealth of the Ghana Empire. Gold dust is packed in leather pouches and hidden in secret compartments to protect it from bandits. Ivory is carefully wrapped to prevent damage during the long journey. Slaves are chained together in groups, their movement carefully controlled to prevent escape. Exotic products from the forest kingdoms, rare woods, animal skins, medicinal herbs, are packed in containers designed to preserve their quality during the arduous journey. The journey to the north takes several months, following ancient routes that have been used for centuries. The caravans travel by night when possible, to avoid the worst heat of the day, and rest during the hottest hours in whatever shade they can find. Water is carefully rationed, with each person and animal receiving only what is necessary for survival. The discipline required for such journeys is extraordinary, and only the most experienced traders attempt them. The profits from successful northern expeditions are enormous. Gold that is common in the Ghana Empire commands fantastic prices in the northern markets, where it is used to make coins and jewelry for the wealthy. Ivory is carved into beautiful objects that grace the palaces of kings and nobles. Even slaves, despite the moral objections of some, are valuable commodities in the northern markets. But the northern routes are not the only channels for the empire's trade. The eastern routes, following the great rivers, connect the empire to the kingdoms of the Upper Niger and the trading cities of the Sudan. These routes are easier to travel but less profitable, carrying goods that are bulky and relatively inexpensive. The western routes lead to the Atlantic coast, where the empire's merchants trade with the fishing peoples and the producers of sea salt. The southern routes, perhaps the most dangerous of all, penetrate deep into the forest kingdoms where gold is mined and ivory is harvested. These routes are threatened by wild animals, hostile peoples, and diseases that flourish in the humid climate. But the profits from successful southern expeditions can be enormous, for the forest peoples are eager to trade their gold and ivory for manufactured goods and salt. The Ghana himself benefits from all of this trade through a complex system of taxes, tribute, and royal monopolies. Every caravan that passes through his territory must pay a tax based on the value of its goods. Every merchant who trades in his markets must pay a fee for the privilege of conducting business. Certain goods, particularly gold and salt, are subject to royal monopolies that ensure the Ghana receives a percentage of all transactions. The royal treasury, housed in the Great Palace complex at the heart of Kumbisala, is said to contain wealth beyond imagination. Gold dust is stored in enormous jars, each one guarded by loyal soldiers. Precious stones and jewelry are kept in locked chests, their beauty hidden from all but the most trusted servants. Silver coins from the northern markets are counted and recounted, their value carefully recorded by the royal scribes. But the Ghana's wealth is not merely accumulated for its own sake. It serves important political and social functions, demonstrating the ruler's power and legitimacy, providing resources for public works and military campaigns, and creating a reserve that can be drawn upon in times of crisis. The Ghana's generosity in distributing gifts and rewards helps to maintain the loyalty of his subjects and allies, while his ability to fund large-scale projects demonstrates his commitment to the welfare of his people. The economic system of the Ghana Empire is thus far more complex and sophisticated than a simple trading network. It is a carefully balanced mechanism that extracts wealth from the natural resources of the region, processes and transforms that wealth through skilled craftsmanship, and distributes it through extensive trade networks that span the entire continent. The Ghana himself sits at the center of this system, not as a passive beneficiary but as an active manager who shapes policy and makes decisions that affect the lives of millions of people. As the sun reaches its zenith and the heat becomes almost unbearable, the market activity begins to slow. The most important transactions of the day have been completed, and the merchants prepare for the midday rest that is essential for survival in the desert climate. The sounds of commerce gradually give way to the quieter rhythms of urban life, as people seek shelter from the sun and prepare for the afternoon's activities. But the economic engine of the Ghana Empire never truly stops. Even as the market square empties and the merchants retreat to their cool chambers, the great machine of trade continues to function. Caravans are being prepared for departure, goods are being processed and packaged, and plans are being made for future expeditions. The wealth of Africa flows through Kumbisala like a great river, carrying prosperity to those who are skilled enough to navigate its currents and brave enough to risk its dangers. This is the true secret of the Ghana Empire's power, not military might or divine authority, but the patient accumulation of wealth through trade, the careful management of resources, and the skilled exploitation of geographic advantages. The Ghana has built his empire not on conquest but on commerce, not on the sword but on the scale, not on the fear of his enemies but on the trust of his trading partners. It is a remarkable achievement, one that has made the Ghana Empire the wonder of the medieval world and the envy of kings and emperors throughout Africa and beyond. The sun stands now at its zenith, a blazing orb of white fire that transforms the very air into shimmering waves of heat. The market square, so alive with activity just hours before, begins to empty as merchants and customers alike seek shelter from the merciless embrace of the desert sun. The stones of the square radiate heat like the surface of a furnace, and even the camels, those patient endurers of desert hardship, seek what little shade they can find beneath the covered arcades that surround the market. This is the sacred hour of rest, when the laws of survival in the Sahara override all considerations of profit and commerce. Shopkeepers pull heavy curtains across their stalls, creating dark chambers where the heat cannot penetrate. Merchants retreat to their houses, where thick walls and high ceilings provide blessed coolness. The very rhythm of life in Kumbisala acknowledges the power of the sun and the wisdom of those who know when to yield to forces greater than human ambition. But while the common people rest and seek shelter, there is one place in the city where activity continues, where the heat of the sun is but a distant concern, where the affairs of empire proceed with the same measured pace regardless of the time of day or the season of the year. This is the Royal Palace Complex, the sacred center of the Ghana Empire, where the divine ruler himself holds court in chambers that mortal eyes have never seen. The approach to the palace is a journey through layers of increasing sanctity and decreasing accessibility. The outermost walls, built of massive stone blocks quarried from distant mountains, rise 20 feet above the surrounding streets. These walls are not merely defensive structures, but symbolic barriers that separate the sacred space of the palace from the profane world of everyday life. The stones themselves are said to have been blessed by the royal priests, and touching them without permission is considered a grave transgression against the divine order. The gates that pierce these walls are masterpieces of craftsmanship and symbolism, carved from single blocks of hardwood brought from the distant forests. They are covered with intricate geometric patterns that tell the story of the empire's founding and the divine mandate of the Ghana dynasty. The patterns are not merely decorative but serve as a form of sacred writing, comprehensible only to the initiated few who have been trained in the ancient mysteries of royal symbolism. Before these gates stand the palace guards, men chosen not only for their physical strength and martial skill, but for their absolute loyalty to the Ghana and their understanding of the sacred nature of their duty. They wear uniforms of white cotton, the color of purity and divine favor, and carry spears tipped with gold, the metal of the sun itself. Their faces are marked with ritual scars that identify them as members of the royal guard, and their silence is as complete as their vigilance. No ordinary person may approach these gates without specific permission from the palace authorities. Even the most wealthy merchants, the most distinguished visitors from foreign lands, must first present their credentials to lesser officials who serve as intermediaries between the world of mortals and the divine realm of the Ghana. The process of gaining an audience, should such a thing be possible at all, can take days or even weeks, involving numerous ceremonies, ritual purifications, and the presentation of appropriate gifts. Beyond the outer gates lies the first courtyard, a vast space paved with smooth stones and surrounded by administrative buildings where the business of empire is conducted. Here work the scribes and accountants who keep track of the tribute flowing in from vassal kingdoms, the tax collectors who ensure that the Ghana's share of commercial profits is properly recorded, and the diplomatic officials who maintain correspondence with foreign rulers. The courtyard itself is a marvel of geometric precision, its layout based on sacred mathematical principles that reflect the divine order of the universe. The buildings that surround this courtyard are constructed according to architectural principles that have been refined over centuries. The walls are thick enough to provide insulation from the heat, while the high ceilings allow hot air to rise and cool air to circulate near the floor. Windows are positioned to catch the prevailing winds while excluding direct sunlight, and the entire complex is designed to create microclimates that remain comfortable even during the hottest days of the year. But the true marvel of the palace complex lies not in its physical structure but in the invisible hierarchy of power and sanctity that governs every aspect of life within its walls. Each level of the complex corresponds to a different degree of proximity to the divine person of the Ghana, and access to each level is strictly regulated according to principles that have been established since the founding of the empire. The second courtyard, reached through another set of guarded gates, is smaller and more intimate than the first. Here gather the Ghana's senior advisors, men who have proven their wisdom and loyalty through years of faithful service. These are the officials who shape policy, who interpret the Ghana's will, who make the countless decisions that keep the empire functioning. They are drawn from the most noble families of the Sonic people, but their authority comes not from birth alone but from their demonstrated competence and their absolute devotion to the Ghana and the principles he represents. The buildings surrounding this courtyard are more luxurious than those in the outer areas, their walls decorated with intricate carvings and paintings that depict the history of the empire and the deeds of its rulers. The rooms are furnished with the finest products of the empire's craftsmen, carpets woven from the softest wool, furniture carved from precious woods, vessels made from gold and silver. Yet even these luxuries pale in comparison to the magnificence that lies deeper within the palace complex. The third courtyard is the realm of the palace priests, the men who serve as intermediaries between the Ghana and the divine forces that govern the universe. These are not merely religious officials but the keepers of the sacred knowledge that legitimizes the Ghana's rule and ensures the continued prosperity of the empire. They are scholars of the ancient texts, interpreters of omens and signs, conductors of the rituals that maintain the cosmic order. The priests dress in robes of deep blue, the color of the night sky and the infinite mysteries of the universe. Their heads are shaved and their faces painted with sacred symbols that mark them as servants of the divine. They speak in whispers when they speak at all, for their voices carry the weight of sacred authority and must not be used carelessly. Their knowledge is vast and their memories perfect, for they are the living repositories of the wisdom that has been accumulated over centuries of royal rule. The fourth courtyard is the domain of the royal family, the brothers and cousins and uncles of the Ghana who share in his divine nature but do not possess his ultimate authority. Here live the princes who may one day succeed to the throne, the princesses who will marry foreign rulers to cement diplomatic alliances, and the elder relatives who serve as advisors and guardians of tradition. The architecture here is more personal and domestic, with gardens and fountains that provide beauty and tranquility in the heart of the desert. But even these royal relatives rarely see the Ghana himself, for he dwells in the innermost sanctum of the palace, a place so sacred that its very existence is known only to a select few. The fifth and final courtyard is the Ghana's private domain, a space that exists at the boundary between the human and divine worlds. Here, in chambers that have never been described by any mortal tongue, the Ghana lives his isolated existence, surrounded by the trappings of divinity and the crushing weight of absolute power. The Ghana's daily routine is governed by rituals that have been unchanged for centuries. He rises before dawn, not to the sound of roosters or the calls of merchants, but to the gentle chanting of priests who have been keeping vigil through the night. His first act each day is to greet the sun, not as a human being grateful for light and warmth, but as a divine being acknowledging his kinship with the celestial forces that govern the universe. The Ghana's breakfast is not a simple meal but a sacred ceremony. Every dish is prepared according to ancient recipes and presented in vessels that have been blessed by the palace priests. The Ghana eats alone, in silence, while priests chant prayers that invoke the blessings of the ancestors and the protection of the gods. Even the act of eating is transformed into a ritual affirmation of the Ghana's divine nature and his responsibility to maintain the cosmic order. After breakfast, the Ghana receives reports from his advisors, but he does not meet with them directly. Instead, he sits behind a screen of woven gold, his presence felt but his person unseen. His advisors speak to the screen, presenting their information and recommendations, while the Ghana listens in perfect silence. When he chooses to respond, his words are conveyed through intermediaries, for his voice is too sacred to be heard directly by mortal ears. The reports that reach the Ghana cover every aspect of the empire's operations. Tax collectors report on the tribute flowing in from vassal kingdoms, their careful tallies recording the gold dust and salt blocks, the ivory and slaves, the exotic goods and manufactured products that represent the empire's wealth. Military commanders report on the security of the borders, the loyalty of subject peoples, and the movements of potential enemies. Diplomatic officials report on correspondence with foreign rulers, the success of trade missions, and the delicate negotiations that maintain the empire's network of alliances. The Ghana's responses to these reports are subtle and indirect, often conveyed through symbolic gestures whose meaning is understood only by those who have spent years learning the intricate language of royal communication. A slight movement of his hand might indicate approval. A particular position of his feet might suggest a need for further information. A change in his breathing might signal displeasure. His advisors must be skilled interpreters of these signs, for the Ghanas will must be understood and implemented, even though it is never directly expressed. The system of government that has evolved around the Ghana's divine persona is both highly centralized and remarkably flexible. Ultimate authority rests with the Ghana himself, but the practical business of administration is conducted by a complex hierarchy of officials who act in his name. These officials derive their power not from personal wealth or military strength, but from their proximity to the Ghana and their ability to interpret and implement his will. The empire is divided into provinces, each governed by a royal appointee who serves as the Ghana's representative in that region. These governors are typically members of the royal family or trusted nobles who have proven their loyalty through years of service. They possess considerable autonomy in handling local affairs, but their authority is ultimately derived from the Ghana, and they must report regularly on their activities and decisions. The governors themselves are supported by local administrators who handle the day-to-day business of government. These men are often drawn from the traditional elites of their regions, local chiefs and notables who have accepted the Ghana's supremacy in exchange for confirmation of their own authority. This system allows the empire to incorporate diverse peoples and cultures while maintaining overall unity and control. The tribute system that supports the empire is both a source of wealth and a mechanism of political control. Each vassal kingdom and subject people is required to send regular tribute to the Ghana's court, the amount and type of tribute determined by the region's resources and economic capabilities. The tribute serves not only to enrich the Ghana's treasury, but also to acknowledge his supremacy and to bind the subject peoples to the imperial system. The collection of tribute is surrounded by elaborate ceremonies that emphasize the sacred nature of the Ghana's authority. Tribute bearers must undergo ritual purification before approaching the palace, and their offerings must be presented according to strict protocols that have been established over centuries. The Ghana himself never appears during these ceremonies, but his presence is felt through the elaborate rituals that surround the acceptance of tribute. The most important tribute comes in the form of gold dust, the foundation of the empire's wealth and the symbol of the Ghana's divine favor. The gold is carefully weighed and measured, its purity tested, and its value recorded by the royal scribes. But the act of presenting gold to the Ghana is more than a simple economic transaction. It is a ritual acknowledgement of his divine nature and his role as the guardian of the empire's prosperity. Salt tribute is equally important, both for its economic value and its symbolic significance. Salt is essential for life in the desert, and the Ghana's control over the salt trade is one of the sources of his power. The presentation of salt tribute is accompanied by prayers and incantations that invoke the Ghana's protection and blessing, transforming a commercial transaction into a religious ceremony. The tribute system also includes human beings, slaves who are presented to the Ghana as acknowledgement of his power over life and death. These slaves are carefully selected for their skills and physical attributes, and their presentation is surrounded by rituals that emphasize the Ghana's role as the ultimate arbiter of human destiny. Some of these slaves are incorporated into the palace household, while others are redistributed to loyal officials as rewards for faithful service. The Ghana's court is a world unto itself, governed by protocols and traditions that have been refined over centuries. Every aspect of court life is regulated by elaborate rules that reflect the sacred nature of the Ghana's person and the divine order that he represents. The courtiers who serve the Ghana are not merely officials but priests of a sort, participants in a continuous ritual that maintains the cosmic balance and ensures the empire's prosperity. The hierarchy of the court is expressed through a complex system of titles, privileges, and ceremonial roles. The highest officials are those who have the privilege of approaching closest to the Ghana's person, though even they never see him directly. These men serve as intermediaries between the Ghana and the rest of the court, conveying his will and interpreting his intentions. Their position is both enormously powerful and extremely precarious, for they must balance the competing demands of absolute loyalty to the Ghana and effective administration of the empire. The Ghana's isolation from the world is both a source of his power and a burden that he must bear. He is revered as a divine being, but he is also a prisoner of his own sanctity, cut off from the ordinary pleasures and experiences that make life meaningful for other people. He cannot walk freely through his own city, cannot speak directly to his subjects, cannot experience the simple human connections that bind other people together. Yet this isolation is not seen as a tragedy but as a necessary sacrifice that the Ghana makes for the welfare of his people. His separation from the world is what allows him to serve as a conduit for divine power, to maintain the cosmic order that ensures the empire's prosperity. The Ghana's personal happiness is less important than his role as the guardian of the empire and the protector of his people. The Ghana's physical person is surrounded by mysteries that add to his aura of divine power. It is said that he never ages, that his body remains young and strong through the intervention of divine forces. Some claim that he possesses supernatural abilities, the power to see into the future, to communicate with the spirits of the ancestors, to control the forces of nature. Whether these claims are true or not, they serve to reinforce the Ghana's authority and to justify the absolute obedience that his subjects owe him. The Ghana's death, when it eventually comes, is surrounded by elaborate rituals that emphasize the continuity of divine rule. His body is said to be preserved through secret processes known only to the palace priests, and his burial is accompanied by ceremonies that ensure his continued presence in the spirit world. The succession to the throne is governed by ancient laws that ensure the smooth transfer of power while maintaining the divine nature of royal authority. The new Ghana, upon his accession, must undergo a series of rituals that transform him from a mortal prince into a divine ruler. These rituals, conducted in the deepest chambers of the palace, are said to involve the intervention of supernatural forces that grant the new ruler the powers and responsibilities of his office. The specific nature of these rituals is a closely guarded secret, known only to the palace priests and the members of the royal family. The Ghana's power extends far beyond the borders of his immediate domain, reaching into the vassal kingdoms and tribute-paying peoples that acknowledge his supremacy. These subject rulers are bound to the Ghana by complex networks of obligation and loyalty that are both political and religious in nature. They rule in their own territories with considerable autonomy, but they must acknowledge the Ghana's ultimate authority and contribute to the empire's wealth and security. The relationship between the Ghana and his vassals is maintained through a system of embassies, gifts, and ceremonial exchanges that reinforce the hierarchical nature of the empire. Vassal rulers must send regular embassies to the Ghana's court, bringing tribute and seeking confirmation of their authority. These embassies are elaborate affairs, involving hundreds of participants and lasting for weeks or months. The Ghana's response to these embassies is carefully calculated to maintain the delicate balance of power that holds the empire together. He must be generous enough to reward loyalty and demonstrate his wealth, but not so generous as to appear weak or to encourage excessive demands. He must be stern enough to maintain discipline and respect, but not so harsh as to provoke rebellion or defection. The empire's military system is built around the Ghana's divine authority and his role as the supreme commander of all armed forces. The Ghana himself never leads armies into battle, for his person is too sacred to be exposed to the risks of warfare. Instead, he appoints trusted generals who command in his name, their authority derived from their proximity to the Ghana and their ability to channel his divine power. The Ghana's army consists of both professional soldiers and militia forces drawn from the subject peoples. The professional soldiers are typically members of the Royal Guard, men who have sworn absolute loyalty to the Ghana and undergone extensive training in the arts of warfare. They are equipped with the finest weapons and armor that the empire's wealth can provide, and they serve as the backbone of the empire's military power. The militia forces are drawn from the general population, organized according to traditional patterns of kinship and locality. These men are less well-trained and equipped than the professional soldiers, but they provide the numerical strength necessary for large-scale military operations. Their loyalty is ensured through a combination of traditional obligations, religious devotion, and the tangible benefits that flow from the empire's prosperity. The Ghana's military strategy emphasizes defensive operations and the protection of trade routes rather than aggressive conquest. The empire's wealth comes from trade, not from territorial expansion, and the Ghana's primary military objective is to maintain the security and stability that allow commerce to flourish. When military action is necessary, it is typically conducted as a police operation rather than a war of conquest, designed to restore order and punish rebellion rather than to acquire new territory. The Ghana's justice system reflects his role as the supreme arbiter of all disputes and the guardian of the divine order. All law ultimately flows from the Ghana's will, though in practice it is administered by a hierarchy of judges and officials who act in his name. The Ghana himself never sits in judgment, for his person is too sacred to be involved in the mundane disputes that characterize human society. The legal system combines traditional African customs with innovations that reflect the complex needs of a multi-ethnic empire. Local disputes are typically handled by traditional authorities according to customary law, while more serious matters are referred to royal officials who apply the Ghana's law. The system is designed to be flexible and responsive to local conditions while maintaining overall unity and consistency. The Ghana's role as the supreme source of justice is expressed through the elaborate rituals that surround the administration of law. Court proceedings are conducted in the Ghana's name, with his authority invoked at every stage of the process. The most serious crimes are considered offenses against the Ghana's person, and their punishment is designed to restore the cosmic order that has been disrupted by the criminal act. As the afternoon heat begins to subside and the shadows grow longer, the invisible presence of the Ghana continues to permeate every aspect of life in Kumbhi-Sala. He is the unseen center around which the entire empire revolves, the divine source of authority that gives meaning and purpose to the complex activities of trade, administration, and daily life. Though he remains hidden behind the walls of his palace, his influence is felt in every market transaction, every judicial decision, every diplomatic negotiation. The Ghana Empire has reached its zenith under this system of divine rule, a remarkable achievement that demonstrates the power of symbolic authority and the importance of legitimacy in governing diverse peoples across vast territories. The Ghana's isolation from the world is not a weakness but a source of strength, allowing him to serve as a symbol of unity and divine favor that transcends the local loyalties and ethnic divisions that might otherwise tear the empire apart. But symbols, no matter how powerful, cannot entirely overcome the material forces that shape human history. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the palace walls, we can sense the subtle changes that will eventually transform this golden age into memory. The Ghana Empire, for all its wealth and power, for all its sophisticated systems of government and trade, remains vulnerable to the inexorable forces of change that govern all human institutions. Yet for now, in this moment of perfect balance between the heat of the day and the cool of evening, the Ghana Empire stands as a testament to the possibilities of human organization and the enduring power of sacred authority. The Ghana sits in his golden chamber, unseen and untouchable, the divine guardian of a civilization that has achieved a remarkable synthesis of spiritual power and material prosperity. The empire he rules is at the height of its glory, a golden age that will be remembered and celebrated long after the last stone of Kumbhi-Sala has crumbled into desert sand. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the spiritual heart of Kumbhi-Sala begins to stir with the ancient rhythms that have governed human existence in this land since time immemorial. The lengthening shadows bring with them not merely the promise of cooler air, but the awakening of forces that dwell in the deeper layers of reality, forces that shape the lives of the people far more profoundly than any earthly ruler or commercial transaction. The evening call to prayer rings out from the minarets of the Muslim quarter, a haunting melody that seems to rise from the very stones of the city and float across the desert like the voice of eternity itself. The muezzin's call is answered by other voices, other prayers, other invocations that speak of the complex spiritual landscape that has evolved in this crossroads of the world. For Kumbhi-Sala is not merely a city of merchants and rulers, but a place where the ancient spirits of Africa encounter the newer revelations of Islam, where the old gods walk beside the new, where the human soul seeks connection with the divine through pathways both familiar and strange. In the traditional quarter of the city, as the shadows deepen and the heat subsides, the practitioners of the old religion begin their evening rituals. These are the followers of the ancestral faith, the keepers of the spiritual traditions that have sustained the Sonic people since the beginning of time. Their religion has no single name, no written scriptures, no elaborate theology, but it possesses something perhaps more precious, an unbroken connection to the spiritual forces that animate the natural world and govern the affairs of humans. The evening ritual begins in the households themselves, where the eldest woman of each family approaches the ancestral shrine that occupies a place of honor in the main room. The shrine is a simple structure, built of clay and decorated with symbols that have been passed down through generations. It houses the spirits of the ancestors, the departed members of the family who continue to watch over their descendants from the realm of the dead. The old woman lights a small oil lamp, its flame flickering in the gathering darkness like a star fallen to earth. She places offerings on the shrine, a handful of millet, a cup of water, a piece of cloth dyed with the red earth of the homeland. These are not expensive gifts, but they carry the weight of love and reverence, the acknowledgement that the living remain connected to the dead, that the boundary between the two worlds is permeable and fragile. Ancestors, she whispers, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the evening wind. We remember you, we honor you, we seek your blessing and your protection. Watch over us in the darkness, guide us in the light, and keep us always in the shelter of your love. The prayer is repeated in similar forms throughout the traditional quarter, as families gather to honor their ancestors and seek their guidance. The words may vary, but the essential message remains the same. The living and the dead are part of a single community, connected by bonds that transcend the apparent finality of death. The ancestors are not distant figures from the past but active participants in the present, capable of influencing events and offering protection to those who remember them with proper reverence. But the ancestral spirits are not the only supernatural forces that shape the spiritual landscape of Kumbisala. The traditional religion recognizes the existence of spirits that inhabit the natural world, the spirits of rivers and trees, of rocks and animals, of the wind and the rain. These spirits are neither good nor evil in the absolute sense, but they are powerful and must be treated with respect and caution. The great baobab tree that stands in the center of the traditional quarter is believed to be the dwelling place of a particularly powerful spirit, one that has watched over the city since its founding. As evening approaches, people begin to gather beneath its massive trunk, bringing small offerings and seeking the spirit's blessing. The tree itself is ancient beyond measure, its gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like the arms of a giant, its roots extending deep into the earth to tap the hidden sources of life. An elderly priest, his body marked with the ritual scars that identify him as a servant of the old gods, approaches the tree with careful steps. He carries a gourd filled with palm wine, a libation that will be offered to the tree spirit as a gesture of respect and supplication. The priest's movements are slow and deliberate, for he understands that he is entering a sacred space where the normal rules of human behavior do not apply. Great Spirit, he intones, his voice resonating with the authority of one who has spent a lifetime in communion with the supernatural world. We come before you as evening falls, seeking your blessing and your protection. You who have watched over this place since the beginning of time, you who have seen the rise and fall of kingdoms, you who understand the deeper currents that move beneath the surface of human affairs, we ask for your wisdom, your guidance, your benevolent influence in our lives. The priest pours the palm wine at the base of the tree, the liquid disappearing into the dry earth with a soft whisper. The gathered people respond with a low murmur, a collective acknowledgement of the spirit's presence and power. They believe, with the certainty that comes from generations of experience, that the tree spirit has heard their prayer and will respond according to its own mysterious wisdom. The ceremony continues as other priests and priestesses approach the tree, each carrying offerings and speaking prayers that address different aspects of the spirit's power. Some seek protection for the city, others ask for prosperity in trade, still others request healing for the sick or guidance for the confused. The tree spirit is believed to possess the ability to influence all aspects of human life, and no request is too small or too large for its consideration. As the ritual unfolds, the boundary between the human and spirit worlds becomes thin and permeable. The participants report sensing the presence of the ancestors, feeling the touch of invisible hands, hearing voices that speak in languages older than memory. These experiences are not considered unusual or supernatural, but are accepted as natural consequences of proper reverence and spiritual preparation. The traditional religion also recognizes the existence of shamans and spirit mediums, individuals who possess the ability to communicate directly with the supernatural world. These specialists undergo lengthy training and initiation processes that prepare them for their role as intermediaries between the human and spirit realms. They are consulted in times of crisis, called upon to divine the causes of illness or misfortune, and asked to intercede with the spirits on behalf of the community. One such medium, a woman named Khadija whose reputation for spiritual power extends throughout the city, has been called to perform a healing ceremony for a merchant who has fallen ill with a mysterious malady. The ceremony takes place in a special hut on the outskirts of the traditional quarter, away from the distractions of daily life and closer to the spirit world that exists in the margins of human existence. The interior of the hut is simple but carefully prepared for the ritual. The floor is covered with mats woven from sacred grasses, and the walls are decorated with symbols that serve as portals to the spirit world. Calabashes filled with water from sacred springs sit in the corners, while bundles of herbs and medicinal plants hang from the ceiling. The air is thick with the smoke of incense, creating an atmosphere that seems to exist outside the normal flow of time. Khadija herself is a figure of compelling presence, her face marked with the intricate patterns that identify her as a practitioner of the ancient arts. She wears robes of white cotton, the color of purity and spiritual power, and her movements possess the fluid grace of one who has learned to navigate between different levels of reality. Her eyes, dark and penetrating, seem to see beyond the visible world to the spiritual forces that shape human destiny. The sick merchant lies on a mat in the center of the hut, his body racked with fever and his spirit troubled by dreams that seem to come from another world. His family surrounds him, their faces drawn with worry and their voices murmuring prayers for his recovery. They have tried the conventional remedies, the herbs prescribed by the traditional healers, the medicines brought by Arab traders, but nothing has relieved his suffering. Khadija approaches the sick man with careful steps, her movements guided by years of training and experience. She places her hands on his forehead, feeling for the spiritual disturbances that may be causing his illness. Her touch is gentle but firm, and those who watch report that her hands seem to radiate a warmth that comes from some source beyond the physical body. The spirits are troubled, she announces after a long moment of silence, her voice carrying the authority of one who speaks with supernatural knowledge. There is a disturbance in the spiritual realm, a conflict between forces that seek to harm and those that seek to heal. The merchant's illness is not merely a disease of the body, but a manifestation of spiritual imbalance that must be addressed through proper ritual and offerings. The healing ceremony that follows is a complex process that involves not only the medium but the entire community of believers. Drums begin to beat in rhythm patterns that are said to open doorways to the spirit world, their sound echoing across the city like the heartbeat of some vast, invisible presence. The drummers are not merely musicians but spiritual practitioners who understand the sacred power of rhythm and its ability to alter consciousness and facilitate communication with the supernatural realm. Other instruments join the drums, rattles made from gourds and filled with sacred seeds, bells that chime with tones that are believed to be pleasing to the spirits, flutes that play melodies passed down through generations of spiritual practitioners. The music creates a sonic landscape that seems to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, bridging the gap between the human and spirit worlds. As the music intensifies, Khadija begins to dance, her movements following patterns that have been perfected over centuries of spiritual practice. The dance is not merely artistic expression but a form of prayer, a way of communicating with the spirits through the language of the body. Each gesture has specific meaning. Each step follows traditional patterns that are believed to invoke particular spiritual forces. The other participants join in the dance, their movements creating a collective rhythm that seems to pulse with supernatural energy. The distinction between performer and audience dissolves as the entire community becomes part of the ritual, their combined spiritual energy focused on the healing of the sick merchant. The dance continues for hours, building in intensity until the participants report entering altered states of consciousness, where the normal boundaries of reality become fluid and permeable. It is during this state of heightened spiritual awareness that Khadija claims to receive direct communication from the spirits. She speaks in voices that are not her own, conveying messages from the ancestors and the nature spirits that govern health and illness. The communications are often cryptic and require careful interpretation, but those who have witnessed such events believe that they represent genuine contact with the supernatural world. The healing ceremony concludes with the preparation of special medicines, not merely herbal remedies but spiritually charged substances that are believed to carry the power of the spirit world. These medicines are prepared according to traditional recipes that have been guarded by spiritual practitioners for generations, their effectiveness depending not only on their physical properties but on the spiritual forces that have been invoked during their preparation. But the traditional religion is not the only spiritual force that shapes life in Kumbisala. The arrival of Islam, brought by Arab traders and missionaries, has created a new layer of religious complexity that both challenges and enriches the spiritual landscape of the city. The Muslim quarter resonates with the sound of evening prayers, the voices of the faithful rising in unison to praise Allah and seek His blessing. The great mosque that dominates the Muslim quarter is an architectural marvel that represents the synthesis of Islamic design principles with local building traditions. Its minaret rises high above the surrounding buildings, its geometric patterns creating a visual harmony that speaks of mathematical precision and spiritual order. The mosque itself is constructed around a central courtyard where the faithful gather for prayer, its walls decorated with calligraphy that presents the word of Allah in beautiful Arabic script. The imam who leads the evening prayer is a scholar named Abdullah ibn Yassin, a man who has spent years studying in the great centers of Islamic learning in Cairo and Cordoba. His voice carries the authority of religious scholarship as he recites verses from the Quran, his words echoing across the courtyard and beyond the walls of the mosque to reach the ears of believers throughout the city. Allah is most great, he intones, his voice rising above the murmur of the assembled faithful. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. We turn our faces toward Mecca, the holy city, and seek the blessing of the one who created all things and governs all affairs. The prayer that follows is conducted in Arabic, the sacred language of Islam, but its meaning is understood by believers whose native tongues are Sonic, Berber, and a dozen other languages. The universality of Islamic prayer creates a sense of connection that transcends ethnic and cultural boundaries, linking the believers of Kumbi Sala to the worldwide community of Muslims that stretches from Spain to Central Asia. The Islamic influence in Kumbi Sala is not merely a matter of religious practice but extends to all aspects of intellectual and cultural life. The mosque serves as a center of learning where scholars teach not only Islamic theology but also mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and other subjects that are considered essential for educated Muslims. The library attached to the mosque contains hundreds of manuscripts, carefully copied and preserved by generations of scribes who understand their role as guardians of knowledge. The Islamic educational system operates alongside the traditional forms of learning that have characterized African societies for centuries. Young boys from Muslim families attend classes in the mosque where they learn to read and write Arabic, memorize passages from the Quran, and study the principles of Islamic law. The education is rigorous and demanding, but it provides access to the intellectual treasures of the Islamic world and prepares students for careers in trade, administration, and religious leadership. The presence of Islam in Kumbi Sala has also influenced the arts and crafts of the region. Islamic geometric patterns appear in the decoration of buildings, textiles, and metalwork, creating visual harmonies that reflect the mathematical principles that underlie Islamic aesthetics. Calligraphy, the art of beautiful writing, has been adapted to decorate objects both religious and secular, transforming the written word into a form of artistic expression. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the religious landscape in Kumbi Sala is the way in which Islam and traditional African religion have learned to coexist and, in some cases, to blend into new forms of spiritual expression. This synthesis is not the result of theological compromise, but rather the natural consequence of practical necessity and human adaptability. Many of the city's inhabitants practice both religions simultaneously, seeing no contradiction between honoring their ancestors and submitting to Allah, between consulting spirit mediums and praying in the mosque. They understand that the spiritual world is vast and complex, containing room for multiple approaches to the divine. The traditional spirits are not abandoned but are reinterpreted as manifestations of Allah's power, while Islamic prayers are offered alongside traditional rituals. The merchant families who have grown wealthy through trade often maintain elaborate ancestral shrines in their homes while also contributing generously to the construction and maintenance of mosques. They see both traditions as essential to their prosperity and well-being, understanding that spiritual power, like commercial success, requires diverse sources and multiple approaches. This religious synthesis is most clearly visible during the great festivals that mark the passage of the seasons and celebrate the community's connection to the divine. The Festival of the Ancestors, held annually during the dry season, combines traditional rituals with Islamic prayers, creating a celebration that speaks to the spiritual needs of the entire community. The festival begins at sunset with the lighting of fires throughout the city, each flame representing a connection to the ancestors and the spiritual forces that govern human destiny. The fires are not merely practical devices for providing light but sacred symbols that create doorways between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Families gather around these fires to share meals, tell stories, and honor the memory of those who have passed into the next world. The traditional drummers begin their performance as darkness falls, their rhythms echoing across the city like the heartbeat of some vast, invisible presence. The drums are not merely musical instruments but sacred objects that possess the power to summon spirits and facilitate communication between different levels of reality. Each drum has its own voice, its own personality, its own role in the complex symphony of spiritual invocation. The drumming is joined by other forms of traditional music, the singing of praise singers who recite the deeds of heroes and ancestors, the chanting of priests who invoke the protection of the spirits, the dancing of young people who celebrate the continuity of life and the promise of the future. The music creates a sonic landscape that seems to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, bridging the gap between past and present, between the human and spirit worlds. But the Festival of the Ancestors is not exclusively traditional in its orientation. Islamic elements have been incorporated into the celebration, creating a unique synthesis that reflects the religious complexity of the city. The Imam from the Great Mosque offers prayers for the dead, asking Allah to grant them peace and to accept their souls into paradise. The Quran is recited alongside traditional prayers, its Arabic verses creating a linguistic bridge between the local and the universal. The festival reaches its climax with a great procession that winds through both the traditional and Muslim quarters of the city. The procession is led by the palace priests, who carry sacred objects and perform rituals that invoke the protection of the Ghana and the spiritual forces that guard the empire. They are followed by the Imam and other Islamic scholars, who recite verses from the Quran and lead the faithful in prayer. Behind the religious leaders come the merchants and craftsmen, the farmers and herders, the young and old, all united in their celebration of the community's spiritual heritage. The procession moves slowly through the streets, stopping at sacred sites and significant landmarks, creating a moving tapestry of faith and tradition that encompasses the entire city. The artistic traditions of Kumbhi reflect this same synthesis of influences and traditions. The city's craftsmen have learned to work with materials and techniques drawn from multiple sources, creating objects that are both functional and beautiful. The metalworkers, for example, combine traditional African techniques with Islamic decorative motifs, producing weapons and jewelry that are prized throughout the empire. The textile workers have developed their own distinctive style, weaving cotton and wool into fabrics that incorporate both traditional African patterns and Islamic geometric designs. The colors they use are derived from local dyes as well as imported materials, creating a palette that reflects the city's position as a crossroads of trade and culture. The woodcarvers specialize in creating objects that serve both practical and spiritual purposes. Their work includes not only furniture and household items, but also ritual objects used in religious ceremonies. The carvings often incorporate symbolic elements drawn from both traditional African art and Islamic aesthetics, creating a visual language that speaks to the spiritual needs of the entire community. The oral traditions of Kumbhi are equally rich and complex, encompassing stories, songs, and poems that preserve the history and values of the community. The griots, the traditional praise singers and storytellers, serve as living libraries who memorize and transmit the accumulated wisdom of generations. Their performances are not merely entertainment but educational experiences that teach moral lessons and preserve cultural memory. The stories told by the griots often blend historical fact with mythological elements, creating narratives that operate on multiple levels of meaning. The tale of the first Ghana, for example, is both a historical account of the empire's founding and a spiritual allegory that explains the divine nature of royal authority. The stories of great merchants and traders serve both to celebrate individual achievement and to illustrate the values that have made the empire prosperous. The arrival of Islam has added new dimensions to the oral tradition, introducing stories from the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. These Islamic narratives have been adapted to local conditions and concerns, creating new forms of religious storytelling that speak to the specific needs of the community. The story of the Prophet's journey to Medina, for example, has been retold in ways that emphasize the importance of trade and commerce, making it particularly relevant to the merchant community of Kumbhi. The musical traditions of the city reflect the same synthesis of influences that characterizes other aspects of cultural life. Traditional African instruments, drums, rattles, and stringed instruments, are played alongside instruments introduced by Islamic culture. The resulting music creates unique sounds that cannot be heard anywhere else in the world, combining rhythmic complexity with melodic sophistication. The dance traditions of Kumbi Sala serve both recreational and spiritual purposes. Some dances are performed purely for entertainment, celebrating the joy of life and the beauty of human movement. Others are sacred rituals that facilitate communication with the spirit world and invoke the protection of supernatural forces. The distinction between secular and sacred dance is not always clear. For the people of Kumbi Sala understand that all forms of artistic expression have the potential to connect humans with the divine. The culinary traditions of the city reflect the same cultural synthesis that characterizes other aspects of life. Traditional African foods, millet, sorghum, and various vegetables, are prepared alongside dishes influenced by Islamic culture. The spices used in cooking come from both local sources and international trade, creating flavors that are both familiar and exotic. The markets of Kumbi Sala offer a remarkable variety of foods that reflect the city's position as a crossroads of trade and culture. Merchants from the north bring dates and dried fruits, while those from the south offer fresh vegetables and exotic spices. The local farmers contribute grains and livestock, while the skilled cooks of the city transform these raw materials into dishes that satisfy both the body and the soul. The evening meals shared by families throughout the city are more than simple nutrition. They are opportunities for social bonding and cultural transmission. Children learn the stories and values of their community while sharing food with their elders, creating connections that transcend individual families and link the entire community together. As the evening deepens and the stars begin to appear in the clear desert sky, the sounds of the city begin to change. The voices of commerce and administration give way to the gentler sounds of family life and spiritual reflection. The calls to prayer from the mosques blend with the drumming from traditional ceremonies, creating a complex symphony that speaks to the spiritual diversity and cultural richness of Kumbi Sala. The Ghana Empire, at this moment in its history, represents a remarkable achievement in human organization and cultural synthesis. The city of Kumbi Sala has become a place where different traditions can coexist and enrich each other, where the spiritual needs of diverse peoples can be met through multiple approaches to the divine, where the material prosperity of trade can be balanced with the deeper human needs for meaning and connection. The religious and cultural life of the empire reflects the same pragmatic wisdom that has made its economic and political systems so successful. Just as the Ghana has learned to govern diverse peoples through flexible and adaptive methods, the religious leaders of the empire have learned to accommodate different spiritual traditions without compromising their essential integrity. The result is a civilization that is both stable and dynamic, rooted in ancient traditions yet open to new influences and ideas. But this golden age of cultural synthesis and religious tolerance exists in a world that is constantly changing. The forces that have made the Ghana Empire prosperous and powerful are also forces that could potentially destabilize and transform it. The increasing influence of Islam, the growing complexity of international trade, the pressures of governing an expanding empire, all of these factors contain the seeds of future change. As the night deepens and the city settles into the quiet rhythms of sleep and rest, the spiritual forces that govern human destiny continue their eternal dance. The ancestors watch over their descendants, the spirits of nature maintain their ancient vigil, and Allah looks down upon his faithful servants with compassion and mercy. The Ghana Empire sleeps, but its dreams are filled with the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. A golden vision of what human civilization can achieve when different traditions learn to work together in harmony and mutual respect.